time it is?
You already know what it is. Live, uncut, unedited. Tell the truth and shame the devil.
All
I
right, people.
love being black.
No one is laying on the pavement. This is no crime scene. No one is talking about politics. This is about mental health today, and something that have affected, especially those of us in the black community, but not just of us in the those of us in the black community, all over. So come on in, people. Come on in. I got a wonderful guest tonight, and she's going to break it down to us. Break it down to us. And she's going to introduce herself as well and tell us about her passion and why she loved this area. So just come on in, people. I need you guys to share the video, share the video, share the video, share the video. And trust me, if this doesn't apply, let it fly. You know, someone needs to hear this. And I'm quite sure as the crime chaser, people, I have been to many crime scenes and I had needed a break. I needed a break because hearing the pain, the cries, and the emotions of family members of their loved ones is laying on the pavement, it did something to me, you know. Sometimes people ask me this, well, Martin, how is it did you able to go to all these crime scenes and see all this blood? Does it affect you? Yes, it does, people. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Because I care. I care. So come on in, people. Come on in. We're gonna open up the phone lines and you'll be able to ask some questions. And we ask you to be polite, no profanity. And if you don't understand something, make sure you put it in the text or you can call in. You're welcome to call in. All right. All right, people, come on in. Come on in. We're going to wait a few more people to come in. All right. I see my YouTube family on here. I see my Twitter X family on here. I see my Facebook family on here. All right. Keep coming on in and make sure, people, you share this video, tag this video. You might be a domestic violence person. You may be a person that have lost a loved one to gunshot violence. You may be a person who have been abused, sexually abused, mentally abused, all of that. You may have been a person that I'm talking codes that want to delete yourself. We're not supposed to say that on there. So this can help you, and we're going to go into deep detail, and we're going to talk about some things, and that's what we're going to do. I'm going to shout out some names of people that's on here. All right, Mr. Ken Taylor, I love being black. I appreciate you. Thank you. All right. All right. We all float, especially with all these serial killers in the city. And and maybe she can back me up, that we have a lot of young teenage boys and girls. They are killers. They will kill. They will kill. All right. I've seen it. I've been to so many crime scenes where I've seen teenagers laying on the pavement with a gun in their hand or gun far away from them. Listen, shot down like an animal in the streets. And we all know that they do the shooting as well too. All right. All right, people, we're going to get ready to get started. Let me see how many people. Hey, LaDonna, come on in. All right, thank you, Drew, for the $1.99. You didn't have to do that, but I appreciate you. Thank you so much for the love. All right. And I'm going to open up the phone lines. Let me put the number up there, too, as well, because I know a lot of you haven't seen the number up in a long time. And I have a beautiful show for you guys. All right, let me put the number up there. Hold on. All right. The number up there. All right, I got 2 call-in numbers, so we're taking calls today. We ask that you be polite. I always say there's no dumb question. Just ask a question and wait for an answer. And if you don't understand something, you're more than welcome to ask another question. But we're only going to be on here less than a little hour or so. So I want to get all the information that we can from our therapist today. Call in numbers. All right, let me put that up top, and we'll be at that. All right. All right, put the numbers at the top so we know we can see the numbers coming up. All right, we're going to get started. And I think we got enough people on here to get started in different chats. So, all right, Miss Linda.
Hello, hello, Mr. Martin. How's it going?
Oh, going wonderful. I'm so glad that I was able to get a hold of you today. Thank you for taking time out of your real busy schedule to come with us today. And I want you to introduce yourself to my panel and tell us a little bit about yourself. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, I'm honored to be here. I really do appreciate the invitation. I can talk about mental health all day,
Mm.
all night, because I do genuinely believe it's a very important topic. My name is Linda Hamza. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and board approved supervisor. I'm the founder of NIA Counseling. I opened my practice about 8 years ago, but I've been in the mental health field for about 15 years.
Mm.
And I started with mental health for a variety of reasons. I'm from Sudan and I'm an immigrant here. And
Okay.
when I first came to America as a middle schooler, I noticed a lot of things that I wish I would have had a therapist at the time.
Okay.
There is a lot of stigma, as you guys know, when it comes to mental health treatment. So when I decided to become a social worker, I interviewed my parents and just asked them questions as far as like back home in our country, how is mental health handled? There
Mm-hmm.
was a lot of laughter and a lot of really disturbing stories being told, where really what it comes down to, and even now, 15 years plus later, being in this field, there's just a lack of um, connections between being human. And I like to talk about mental health instead of mental illness, because not everybody has a mental illness, but everybody has mental health. But there is a lack of connection between what it means to be a human and to have that need for our mental health to be addressed, and actually being able to connect with someone who understands what it means to be Black, who
Mm-hmm.
understands what it means to be an immigrant, who looks like us and talks like us and is able to create that safe space.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping not just to be that for my clients, but to help young therapists be that for their clients too. I want to help make the change and build this community where mental health is not stigmatized like it is, where we can all talk about our mental health and address it.
Mm.
It's a
You
part of
know,
being human.
yeah, I want to say something real quick. In our community, in the Black community, we was taught just pray to Jesus. Jesus will fix it, and I'm quite sure you heard this, and
I
we
hear
don't
it a
need no
lot.
we don't need no therapist. God is my God, and we just pray and God will heal. We hear that a lot. We
And there's nothing wrong with having faith. There is nothing wrong with using your faith, whatever that faith may be, as a coping skill. But I think what happens, whether it be in the church, or I'm Muslim, so I hear that, just pray to Allah.
uh
But I think what happens is you invalidate the person's experience.
mm-hmm.
You shame them as if having a mental illness is a lack of faith. It's not a lack of faith.
Right.
You can pray to Jesus or pray to Allah or pray to whomever it is you believe in and have asthma. And that don't mean that you don't need to go get that inhaler, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just because you have faith, that doesn't take away the necessity to address this human body. And so we've
Mm-hmm.
got mind, we've got body, we've got soul.
Mm-hmm.
Your mind needs to be treated a certain way. Your body needs to be treated a certain way. Your soul needs to be treated a certain way. Sometimes I do incorporate your faith in therapy,
Mm-hmm.
but I call it spiritual bypassing. When you don't do the work, when you don't face whether it be trauma or depression or anxiety, and you just say, oh, I'm just going to pray about it. Sounds good, but sounds like you're avoiding dealing with it. I'm not going to let you get away with that.
Mm.
And I think it hurts other people when you tell them that. Just pray about it. Nope. You can pray about it and you can address it.
That's what I'm talking about. Now, without revealing too much, I know there's a client confidentiality. I'm quite sure you have seen so many different looks, different anxiety, bipolar, manic depression. Um, what do you do for your mental health when you dealing with the clients? I'm quite sure you release a lot of energy.
Well, I think it's really, really important to practice self care. And
Mm,
so I talk about self care with every single one of my clients, and I can't be a hypocrite. So
mm.
if I'm going to be preaching it, I also
Okay,
need to be practicing it. So
okay.
as you can see, I'm sipping on my tea.
Mm,
Before every session, I tune in, I do my own deep breathing, I meditate, I touch base with my source, right? My higher
mm,
power. I make sure that I'm okay because you
mm,
can't pour from an empty cup.
mhm,
So when I go into the session, and this is really important for our listeners, when you do find that therapist, there's a lot of different modalities, and we'll talk about that later as far as what treatment is your therapist using. But really, it has to do with the connection, that relationship. But when I go into a session, it's not about me, it's not about Linda. At that point in time, I'm creating this safe space where I'm helping my client tap
mhm,
into and to talk about sometimes their trauma, sometimes, their grief, sometimes their mental illness, whether it be bipolar, schizophrenia, whatever that need is. But I have to come back and take some time for me to process through, we call it in therapy, counter transference. Did I have some feelings that I had to put aside during this session to be there for my client? Which it's okay, it's natural, I'm human. But I didn't make it about me during the session. I can't ignore that part. I have to come back and unpack it. And a lot of therapists will tell you, we also go to therapy. I tell people all the time, you can't tickle yourself. You got to
mhm.
get your own help. And the more work we do as therapists, the more we're able to hold that space for our clients. But self care, self care, self care, that's an
Mm,
important part of life. It's not just getting your hair done, getting your nails done. Those are good too.
yeah.
Getting that massage, whatever, those things are important. But self care could also be making sure that you journal, making sure that you take some time, get some sun, eat healthy, exercise. All of that counts.
Okay.
I gotta practice what I preach.
That's right. I was reading over some things that you sent me, and point number 3, it said the common mental health challenges. Explore the common mental health issues: anxiety, depression, PTSD, bipolar disorder, eating disorders. Discuss the physical symptoms and warning signs of mental health issues that people should watch out for. All right.
So when it comes to mental health, we use what's called the DSM. The DSM is the big bad book of diagnoses,
Okay.
and we update it every once in a while. So the latest one, the DSM-5, is the one that we're currently using, and the DSM-5 has criteria for each diagnosis. And so your clinician, whether it be your therapist or your psychiatrist, will take everything that you say into account and do an assessment. And I do say that it's both a science and an art,
Mm,
because we can't just, oh, I feel like you have anxiety, right? We can't just
right.
go based on our feelings. We want to make sure that it's based on scientific research.
Okay.
But we also want to make sure that it's culturally competent. So when we use the DSM, we look for those physical symptoms or warning signs. And that's how you could also advocate, whether it be for yourself, your family member, your friends, if you notice that their behavior has changed. For example, you have a friend, they're bubbly, they're outgoing, but you notice that they've been pulling away, they're isolating, they're giving away things. you may be concerned. You may be worried about them, right? Depression does sometimes look like sadness, but for adolescents, for example, sometimes depression, not just adolescents, I think also for Black men,
Mhm.
sometimes it doesn't look the typical way that it's depicted in the movies. Sometimes it looks like anger,
Mhm.
right? They're just more frustrated. They don't have as much tolerance. They're yelling, they're screaming, but that's not how they normally are. So you really want to look at what has changed, what's shifted. Whether it be depression, anxiety, bipolar, or any of these disorders, a lot of times we see um, either eating too much or not eating enough,
Mhm.
sleeping too much or not sleeping enough, not being able to get out of bed. These are some of the things we look for. Um, with bipolar, ADHD, sometimes we also see impulsivity, right? So somebody doing things without thinking. Not
Mm.
everyone who has a mental health issue is violent, and
Okay.
not everyone who has a mental health issue has an issue with drugs or alcohol. But sometimes when you don't have your mental health issue addressed or medicated, sometimes people do self-medicate with drugs or alcohol.
Mm.
We can also see behaviors such as um, being sexually acting out, doing things you normally wouldn't do. Again, that could either be bipolar if you're having a manic episode, or again, it could be you were on the receiving end of being sexually assaulted and you're acting out. And so I think it's really important not to watch TikTok videos and self diagnose. You want to
Mm.
go to somebody who's a professional, who's able to give you the proper diagnosis. In the same token, I think it's important that these diagnoses don't label you. You know, I do have asthma. I don't walk around being like, hi, I'm asthma. Like, no, I'm
Right.
Linda, but I do have asthma. So whether you have depression or bipolar or whatever the diagnosis is, that's not who you are. But it is important to get that label so the professionals know how to treat you.
Mm.
And it's important to get the right diagnosis.
Now I have a question, and this may sound dumb. It may sound dumb.
No dumb questions. Come at
Okay.
me.
All right. Is there a true healing for these different mental disorders? Do people really recover from their mental issues?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I think there is differences even within therapists and psychiatrists about what some people believe. Some people believe once you have a diagnosis, you always are going to have that diagnosis. I don't believe that. I've lived otherwise. I've seen otherwise. Now, if you have a suicidal thought, for example, you're more likely to have that thought again. If you have true bipolar and you have a manic episode, you have a depressive episode, there is the likelihood that even if it's 10 years later that you have another episode. But a lot of times what I see, and you talked about it a bit earlier, trauma. I think it's
Hmm.
important to address trauma. I had a client, for example, who was diagnosed with bipolar, diagnosed with PTSD, diagnosed with several other things. And she and I worked together and we did some amazing trauma work for a few years. And she was pleasantly surprising her psychiatrist when she said, I don't believe I need medication for bipolar anymore. Now, does somebody who truly have bipolar need to get off their meds? No, I would not recommend that. But I don't believe she truly had bipolar. I think she was misdiagnosed, and what she had was complex trauma. And when
Hmm.
we started to peel back those layers and truly offer healing, then it didn't look the same anymore.
Mm. Now, here living in Chicago and being a crime chaser, I've been to many crime scenes, as I was telling earlier.
Yeah.
And when I hear parents of the loved ones that's victims cry, I turn the camera around, I get out of there because it does something to me. It's a certain emotion
Yeah.
It's like it rubs off on you. You just want to break down.
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you a story. Listen to this, Facebook. I remember it was had to be about 10 years ago, maybe 10, 12 years ago. There was a little bitty baby shot and killed in the city of Chicago on 65th and Maryland, I believe, between Maryland and Drexel. And the police was saying that the father held the baby up and used the baby as a shield. And we found out that wasn't true. But the baby
Mm.
was in his lap. You know, you had your baby. It was a cargo van. People came up and shot. So eventually, when they made the funeral arrangements, I went to the wake where you could view the body. The family came, walked in, and I heard a cry that I've never
Mm.
heard before, and it almost made me just fall out, just faint. And I'm just
Mm.
like, man, do people know the pain and the trauma when they shoot and kill a person? What happens to the family? They don't understand, and
Mm.
that I experienced that.
Mm.
So I have a heart for gunshot victims, and I
Mhm.
understand. And it could be a terrible person that got killed, but I still have a heart for them. I don't want to see this happen to nobody. And it's the family members, they suffer, the children, they suffer. And I've seen in certain cases where my sister, my nephew, uh, her son got killed, shot so
I'm
many
so
times.
sorry.
She's never been the same, never been the same.
Mm.
I had a cousin, well, my first cousin, she's my second older cousin. It was like she just went into a trance. She was never the same.
Yeah.
And both of them told me, they said, Martin, I don't wish this on nobody, not even my worstest enemy. She said, you would
Yeah.
not understand until you walk this path. And I was like, man, I don't never want to walk that path.
Yeah.
So that's the story I had to tell. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. I think that takes a lot of courage to share because even as you're talking about it, I can see in your face, I can hear in your voice, you're reliving it.
Mm-hmm.
And even though it didn't happen with the story with the baby, even though it didn't happen to your baby, even though
Mm-hmm.
it didn't happen to your family, just being there and seeing it, even the way you described where it was, when it was, your mind stores trauma like taking a picture.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is it gets stuck in a loop where different things that you hear or see in present day can take you back to that state of that trauma. And so when we talk about flashbacks, a lot of times people used to think PTSD was just for the military. But PTSD can happen to a variety of people for a variety of situations. And I would say witnessing and being in that close proximity to a baby being shot, that is
Mm-hmm.
absolutely traumatic.
Mm-hmm.
And so, even for your sister and the other people that you mentioned, um, the right being able to survive something like that, what happens to the brain, which amazes me, is it compartmentalizes. It says, this is too much. This is too much for me to handle. So I'm going to break it apart and I'm going to put this part in a box.
Mm-hmm.
Now, just because I put it in a box in the back of my mind doesn't mean that it doesn't affect the way I think or the way that I behave. But out of sight, out of mind, we try to cope that way. So, one of the modalities that I'm trained in that I think it's amazing, it's called EMDR. EMDR stands for eye movement,
Mm-hmm.
desensitization, and reprocessing. And what EMDR does is you're still present with the therapist, but it allows you to go back to where that original trauma happened, where it got stuck in your mind and your brain didn't process through it any further. And so it allows us to mimic, you know how when you sleep, your eyes kind of go back and forth?
Mm-hmm.
So it allows us to use our brain's natural ability to process, but to do it for that very, very tough situation that caused these feelings and these thoughts and caused us to get stuck in that space. And once we've done that reprocessing, I don't know that I believe anybody can go back to how it used to be, especially after losing a child. This past October, I lost my mother to pancreatic cancer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know that I can fathom going back to before. But I do believe that I can create a new normal where I can be present for and with my kids, be present for my clients. But
Mm.
that means that all of these tough feelings that I had this past year that I couldn't process through, that I do have to come back and visit. And EMDR would be one of other type of modalities that your therapist or your sister's therapist could take and help that person overcome that trauma.
Now, I can
It's just,
share something with you too. I understood that. Now, today I went to go get my birth certificate. I needed for another form of ID, and I printed out. The lady asked, "Well, what's your mother name?" I said my mother name. My mother taking mine. She's been deceased since '89. And when I looked at the birth certificate, I remember the hospital that she told me I was born in, and I seen her signature. And when I looked at
mm,
her signature, I said, "Look at my mother's signature." It relived. It wasn't a hurt. It wasn't a guilt, but it was just like, look at my mother's signature, you know.
mm,
And what came in my mind is my mom named me Martin because I was born in '68, and I was just looking.
mm.
I was like, man, what was she thinking? What was she thinking? What was my father thinking when they named me? So it just her signature just took me back in my mind.
Yes.
It's a
Yes.
I don't know if you call it a recall. I don't know how to explain it, but I was just said, look at my mother's signature. I didn't feel bad or sad or anything. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
But you notice that.
yeah.
And that's really what we hope for. So we don't erase memories, we don't change memories, but what we do is get you to that place of acceptance.
Mm,
I think acceptance is really important because when we don't feel acceptance, and what I see in my office often is somebody will feel something and then they'll have what we call as therapists secondary emotion,
mm,
which means, let's say I feel sad, but then I feel guilty for feeling sad, or I feel angry, but then I feel shame for feeling angry. So these secondary emotions, they are counterproductive. They don't help us process through. Because the truth is, all feelings come and go. But when
mm,
they're not going, when they're stuck, I think of
mm,
emotions like water.
mm.
Water, you need water to live.
Yes.
But stagnant water, that's where you get all the illnesses. You don't want
Mm,
stagnant water. Same with our feelings. We don't want stagnant emotion. And,
mm,
we're taught how to brush our teeth. We're taught how to drive, how to walk, how to talk. But are we taught how to process through our feelings? Most adults don't even know more than 3 feelings. So I think that,
wow.
again, I like to talk about mental health instead of just mental illness, because we do need to learn how to process through our emotions. And I know when I grew up, I heard a lot of things like, toughen up, buttercup.
Yeah.
You have all this to be
Mm,
grateful for. What you sad about?
mm-hmm.
When the truth is you can be grateful and you can have depression.
Mm,
It's not either or. So I think, again, there's a lot of myths, there's a lot of um untrue stories that we've been told that we have to break down and really challenge them. Because, like you said earlier, like, just pray about it. Okay, that sounds good. But what if that person is really depressed and suicidal? Then maybe hearing that will create that secondary emotion instead of helping them get to the bottom of what's wrong, what's really going on.
mm.
So a lot of times I really recommend, whether it's you or somebody you love and care about, if somebody comes to you and they're saying, I'm not okay, it's okay not to be okay. Sometimes, even if you don't know the right thing to say, sit with them, ask them more open ended questions. And then I think as a community, as a Black community, we need to normalize therapy. We need to normalize that you don't have to be crazy,
Mm-hmm.
right, to go to therapy. There's a lot of reason people go to therapy.
Now, I've recently, I know of a story where, a domestic violence story. Let me tell you about this story.
Mm,
There's a lady had some children by, well, two different baby fathers, three children, and one, the baby is the father just doing domestic violence against the woman. He broke her leg, and
mm,
he broke her leg, and so I asked her. I said, "Well, what was the children that when you guys was fighting and all that?" Well, I had told him to go upstairs, you know, and I'm like, I'm imagine these young children just hearing the trauma. I
Mhm.
mean, will they be the same? I mean, what's going on? I don't know. What would I say to her? You know, I
Yeah.
don't know what to
Well,
say to
I
her.
think domestic violence situations are very important to learn about because sometimes um, statistics show that whether it's the man or the woman, right?
Right.
Whoever is the victim of domestic violence oftentimes leaves or tries to leave 7 to 8 times before they stay gone. So a lot of times people come back to these abusive situations for a variety of reasons. Sometimes they're isolated just in the time of that relationship, right? Their
Mm.
self-esteem is shot. So they don't have the confidence. They've been told all these stories by the abuser. And abuse doesn't happen in domestic violence situations every single day.
Right.
Sometimes it's like when it's good, right? So the person themselves starts to question themselves as far as like, is it really that bad, right? Or I don't want this person to be without their other parent if it's a parent
Right.
situation. So what happens a lot of times is that person needs to build up a very good safety plan because when they're leaving, statistics show that that's the most dangerous time.
Mm.
That's the time that sometimes they can be in danger. Sometimes when they are really leaving, if that abuser has a hold over them or we don't know their own mental status where that person is, sometimes that's where they can die. It can be fatal
Mm.
when they're trying to leave or survive a situation. So I would really recommend um, being able to still be a listening ear to that person, still keep that line of communication open because sometimes, again, they feel a lot of shame if they realize how bad the situation is. They feel a lot of shame. And so
Hmm.
you're absolutely right. Those kids that are hearing it, even though they're upstairs, I can hear the mom's protective factor trying to send the kids away, but they're still hearing it. They're exposed
Mm.
to it, right?
Mm.
But I could st- I could still see if she's able to come back and keep talking to you, that if she is at that point where she's ready, then you can share with her some crisis hotlines
Okay.
where 24/7 she can talk to someone who's trained because it does take, I would even say not every therapist is equipped to work with domestic violence. You really do have to have specialized training to be
Okay.
able to help the person and not put them more in danger or their kids. But I have worked with quite a few people
Okay.
who
Wonderful.
have successfully been able to leave an abusive situation.
I have
A
a
lot of domestic violence, just one more quick point,
go ahead.
resource. A lot of the domestic violence websites also have the cool feature that if the abuser comes in, they can click one button and it's erased from the history. So
Mm.
being able to just provide more education, I think, is a good place to start, but it is complicated.
And in your practice, have you ever dealt with gunshot victims? What victims or victims' family members? How do they cope with it? You know, is it a mental breakdown or like my sister? I mean, I just look at my sister and she don't. I mean, it's not there. You know, she's
Yeah.
so overprotective of the ones that live in her children now. I mean, she loved
Yeah.
them even more closer. She holds a tight grip. They all grown, and she's still like, "You all right?
Yeah.
Everything is okay." And you know, you just, I don't know what it's like to lose a loved one, and I mean, a child. So I don't
Yeah.
ever want to experience that. I'd rather die first before I see one of them die. I'm just me. Period. I don't know if I can take it, live with it. Yeah.
Well, I hope it doesn't happen to you, but I
Mm.
think it's important to yes, I have to answer your question, worked with people who have lost children. I used to also work at maximum security facility, so I
Oh
worked with a lot
wow.
of people who have committed crimes of various types, quite heinous crimes. Um, I think there's also situations where I've worked with people like in we call them partial hospitalization programs. So I would have them come in every day instead of going to work or going to school. They come in from 9 to 5 or 9 to 3, and we do group for 2 to 3 weeks. So I've worked with a few people who have lost children. And what I saw is there is a grief component where people say all the time, I'm sure you've heard it, Martin, time heals.
Yes,
I
I've
think
heard
it
it. I've
takes
said
time
that
to
myself.
heal.
Mm,
I'll tell you, I have a counter argument to that. Time
mhm,
alone doesn't heal. It
mm,
takes time to heal, but you have to actually do the healing. So
mhm,
grief, one particular client comes to mind who lost her son, and she didn't grieve. And time went 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and it got to a point where she could smell him.
mm,
She could swear that she could see him in and around her house. And she didn't truly have hallucinations in the traditional sense, but her mind was starting to play games with her because she didn't actually feel the grief. And I tell you, grief is painful.
mhm,
Grief is extremely painful. And for a mother losing a child, like you said, I can't even fathom that.
mm,
But that's again where I think having a therapist or a counselor, someone who's trained, they can help you have coping skills to where when you go there to that dark place, you're not there by yourself.
mhm.
It's been a long time since I've been to Chicago, but what I usually tell people is, would you go to downtown Dallas by yourself in a dark alley? No. But
No.
if you're going to have to go, because that's where your mind feels like sometimes, then you're going to need to take somebody with you. And not
Mhm,
just your therapist. Like a lot of times in therapy, I'm working with people to make sure they have a good support system.
mhm,
Those, family, friends, community, church members, whoever that is, having a good community can also help you be able to handle those tough emotions to where you don't have to go there alone. But what you're describing with your sister is she may be, dissociating and compartmentalizing, but it's hard to tap back into there. So there's a different modality besides EMDR. It's called IFS, or internal family system. And we describe it as parts. So it may be a long time since she lived out of her true self, since she lost her child in that traumatic way. It may be that she's functioning more of one of her protectors,
mm,
and those protectors get tired. So
mm.
it's not something you want to do long term. That amount of stress can really contribute not just to your mental health, but to your physical health too, because they're connected, mind, body, and soul. All three need to work together.
I Now she has a grandson which was born a couple of days after he was killed. Looks
Mm.
exactly like him.
Mm.
It reminds her. I mean, she's just that's her baby. Looks just
Yeah,
like her son. Look like my nephew, and I mean, she just loves him and holds him. And I said, that's your son all over again. So I
gotta
think that
protect them.
that helps her get over some of that pain, pain. So,
Yeah.
son, act just like him, walk like
Mm.
him, look like him, just stand like him. Never seen his father, but
Yeah,
all the attributes are there.
that's amazing.
Mhm. So
That's
that's
amazing. And you talk about something really important too, Martin, where you know real real life experiences that are happy and healthy really do help us in life. And so, I tell people often, like, the opposite of sadness is not happiness. The opposite of depression is not happiness. The opposite is gratitude.
mm,
Being able to count your blessings, being able to notice and acknowledge and really connect with the good things that are happening to you and for you and to your family and to your loved ones, to your friends. I think that's really an underrated practice, the practice of gratitude. But it really does, gratitude, as well as, like I said, that self-care and self-esteem, those are really some of the best protective factors for our mental health and
mm.
against mental illness.
I want to switch just a little bit. Here in Chicago, we had under one of our Rodney Manuel administration, we had a lot of mental health centers shut down. And
Mm,
especially in the Black community, I believe that really hurt us.
mm,
And we have a lot going on in the Black community. Especially me, I grew up in the element where neighborhoods were drug infested, prostitute, killing, all types of stuff you see. I mean, just trauma. You will hear gunshots, you just hit the ground.
mm,
These things become normal. You know,
mm.
so and so got shot over there. Oh, he did. Is he all right? I mean,
Mm. It's
it's I,
normalized.
it
It's
is
so common.
yes.
Mm,
And it grows up, it messes with you when you be afraid to go places, and when you hear an outburst, you ready to get your coat and run. That's me. I
mm.
When I sense any little danger, I want to get out the way. Yeah,
Yeah.
out the way. So I don't
And so you're
crime.
describing,
Go ahead.
no, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Yeah, I want to hear what you said. I'm describing one.
I was going to say you're describing a very natural human response to danger, right?
Mm,
So we have our fight, flight, and you may have heard this fight or flight,
yeah.
right? But there are two more that we don't talk about enough. There is the freeze and the fawn response. So the
Mm,
fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. The fight response is you sense you're in danger. That's my 4-year-old, right? If I'm about to tickle him or he feels attacked, the first thing he does is he headbutts, right? So he's about to fight first, talk later. So some of us, again, depending on that environment, depending on your surroundings, that response isn't even really a choice.
mm,
It's just how you learned how to survive. It's a
mm,
reaction. We also have the flight. And so, like you, my shins get tight. My warning signs let me know way before I even realize that I'm angry, I'm in danger, and my instinct is to dip, right? So
right.
that's your flight response. Then there is the freeze. Sometimes people who are in situations like, again, communities where violence is very prevalent may feel guilty because they may feel like, oh, I should have fought. Well, maybe you didn't because you're programmed to freeze, and freezing may save your life. There is no shame in how you respond. You can't control how you respond. This also happens often for, again, people who are in domestic violence situations. Sometimes people say, well, why didn't you fight back? Maybe that person couldn't. Maybe in the moment, freezing is how their body told them to do it so they can survive. The fawn response is more of codependency, learning that if I give this person love, if I again go outside my own boundaries and provide and give to this person, then it'll keep me safe. So relying, instead of like a drug, being addicted to another person. So if you
Mm,
see someone, for example, they just can't be single, they go from relationship to relationship to relationship, and the way that they act in that relationship is not fair to them, they're not being respected, right? It may be that they're suffering from that fawn response. So
mm,
whether it's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, what happens when you experience trauma is it goes a little haywire. Imagine yourself driving a car and you're on the highway, but it's on reverse, going
mm,
70 miles an hour. That's just a recipe for disaster, right? Or if you're on neutral going up a hill, right? So what happens is if you don't do the work, if you don't do the healing, is your system just does what it does. It'll help you survive, but it won't help you thrive. So
mm,
if you don't do the healing, it may be, like you said, you're in that environment where, and I'll tell you, when I worked with people before, not just in that maximum security, I used to work at an adolescent forensic program. So I worked with these teenagers who have gone to different hospitals, but they got involved with the legal system. They had probation officers. Some of them were involved in gangs. And so I would be very careful as a therapist of what I'm asking them to do or change, Because if you're going to go back to that same environment, I don't want to disarm you. I don't want to take away a coping skill. And then you find yourself back in that same environment and you're in danger. So I think it's really important that the change doesn't just happen individually, but that the resources are available. So a lot of therapists, since COVID started, a lot of therapists are able to see people virtually. So if there's not a therapist that's available to you in your community, right? Maybe there's one across within the same state, but in a different city far away, and you're able to tap into them. I have a lot of clients who do our virtual sessions with their phones. So even if you don't have access to internet or you don't have access to a computer, you still are able to access a therapist, right? If you don't have insurance or you can't afford the expensive therapy, there are resources like MHMR that every county has that offers free or reduced price counseling. If you have Medicaid or Medicare, there's a lot of therapists who accept those insurances. So I think it's important that we break down the barriers for people, all people, regardless of what their socioeconomic status is, to be able to access the treatment so that we can break down those automatic responses. And we can choose when to fight. We can choose when to flight. They're not right or wrong, but when you've gone through so many traumas, it becomes an automatic response.
Wow. I want to ask a question, and just me, my observation. When I see, I'm talking about our culture, Black men and Black women are always angry. And I'm like, why is this person always angry? Never crack a smile, always fussing, always complaining. And I'm trying to figure out what is going on with this person. Nothing. They never happy. You can tell them some good news, and it rolls off their back like like a duck or some water on a duck. So what type of I don't know I don't know how to describe that person. They're just evil. They negative. They unhappy. They don't want to see nobody else happy. I call them a miserable person. That's just me outside looking in.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I'm going to challenge you to not use that word always,
Okay.
because, I hear where you're coming from,
Okay.
because when you see someone who acts this way often, it's hard not to say always. But, I oftentimes see that when somebody is miserable like that, like I described with IFS, that there's a part that's keeping them trapped. So people can only respond to you with as much grace as they give themselves. So there's a concept, there's a guy named Pete Walker, and he talks a lot about complex trauma. And he talks a lot about like the 4Fs, the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. So there's a couple of terms that he uses that I really, really love. He says inner critic and outer critic. So people who have experienced different traumas often have an inner critic. And so that's that voice that tells you, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart, I'm ugly, or I have to be perfect, or I don't deserve this, kind of all that negative self-talk that a lot of us struggle with at a time or another. And some people struggle with it a lot more often than others. But what I like about the way that Pete Walker talks about it is he also describes the outer critic. The outer critic is judging others the same way that their own inner critic is judging them. So they may feel like they're not safe. And so I think a lot of times what I see is in the Black community, there has been a variety of reasons why we don't feel safe. And so I'm not going to let my guard down and smile and talk positively if I feel like I'm in danger. So it may be that they have this mask. And it may be really annoying to be on the receiving end of that mask when it's like, smile, bro, like chill, it's okay, right? But that person may be suffering. They may be suffering. And I do believe that hurt people hurt people. So if they don't have enough awareness of how they come across, they may bring you down, right? But I again think as a therapist, this is where I wish healing for that person. I wish awareness and connection for that person, so they can let their guard down and be able to tap into what's happening that's making your inner and outer critic act like that. Because you're right, you don't want to be around somebody who's negative all the time. But it may be, again, whatever issues, mental health issues they've got going on. They just don't know how to stop it,
We got
but
a caller. Actually, my phone hung up, so just give me a minute, a brief pause. We got a call. I want to take this caller real quick.
All right.
They just called in.
Hey, caller. This is Martin G, a.k.a. the Crime Chaser.
My phone hung up, so I'm going to get this
Uncut,
caller we got.
Unedited broadcast. Just before you speak, please turn down all your audio. Please turn them off or down, and do not have us on speakerphone so we won't have an echo, and we'll be with you shortly. Thank you so much.
At the tone, please record your name for announcement.
Johnson. Okay. Area code 912. What's your question and comment?
Joined.
Area code 912. What's your comment or question? Area code 912.
Oh, hey, Martin.
Hey, how you doing, Sarge?
Yeah. Hey, Martin.
All right.
Hey,
you be nice to Linda now.
The doctor's on here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Martin, can I, Martin?
Okay.
Now, I know it's your show, but you do that to me too much. Now, she is a professional in the area that she's in. Now, I've been telling civilians, look, if they're diagnosed PTSD, they've been going to, counselor therapy, this and that, like 2 years, they can get Social Security. They don't believe me. Maybe she could tap in on that and give them some knowledge, because she's a subject matter expert and a professional in that field. And people will listen to her.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your question. So in Texas, it's a little bit different, so I can't speak to how it is in Chicago, but across the United States of America, there are some things that you can tap into, and PTSD is one of them. For example, if your child has depression, ADHD, anxiety, whatever the case may be, and it's impacting their school, there is something called 504 where they can get accommodations. And it's not the same as special education, but they can get accommodations if they need to step out the class to, take a moment because they're having panic attacks, or they need reduced assignments. I think that's an important resource that not a lot of people know about. For jobs, if you do need to take some time off work so you can take care of your mental health, there is FMLA, Federal Medical Leave Act. That's federal, so that's across all 50 states, and that secures your job to where you don't get fired just because you took time to take care of your mental health. You don't necessarily get paid during that time, but it does secure your job. However, depending on your policy, if you have a job and you need to take some time off, there is short-term and there is long-term disability, and those pay differently, but those do help you get some income. If, again, you can look at your HR department if you need to step away to take time to take care of your mental health. With FMLA, you could also use that if you need to take time off work to take care of a family member's mental health. It's not just for you personally, but there is so many weeks that are available per year that you can use that FMLA for and not lose your job. But what the caller was talking about is SSDI or SSI. And what that is being on disability.
Right. Thank you.
Absolutely. I have had a few clients who have suffered from mental health issues, and that did qualify them for disability. Now, I don't know that in Texas it's the same as far as 2 years, but it is if it's documented, and your psychiatrist, your therapist, they can definitely provide that information once you start the process to be able to get on disability. And I tell people all the time, if you need it, apply for it. That's what it's there for. I have a client right now who I've been treating for a little bit over a year, but they've had a lot of difficulty with maintaining a job. They have difficulty getting out of bed, taking a shower. And so they do have complex PTSD. And so I just spoke with them and their parent. Although they're an adult, I talked with their parent to say, I really do think, and I spoke with their psychiatrist too, that you need to apply for disability. It's difficult when you're struggling with PTSD and you feel a lot of stress because you don't have enough money to eat and you don't feel like you can go to work. And so that's what it's there for. Now, if you're able to get legal counsel to help you with that, I know in Texas, it's a little bit difficult to get disability. But I would say I've at least had a few clients who were able to successfully get disability. And it doesn't mean you can't work. It's just there is only X amount of hours or X amount of income that you can have. But it does guarantee you medical insurance, right? Because that gets expensive, whether it's Medicare or Medicaid, and being able to have enough income to where you can have a roof over your head and you can access the care that you need. I think that's a very, very, very important resource, and it is available. And so it's something that you need to fight for to be able to get. There are some, I know, free legal aid. It may take a minute to get that lawyer if you need it, but there are lawyers that specialize in disability and being able to help you walk that path to make sure that you are taken care of and your family members are taken care of while you're trying to do some of your healing. The caller also mentioned
that's a great help. I'm glad you gave that information, because I tell people stuff like this and they think I'm combat veteran suffering from PTSD and a whole bagload of other things. I get stigmatized, and it doesn't bother me, at all, because I'm like, look, I'm trying to help you. So if you don't want it, hey, fine. You know what I mean? It's your loss, not mine. I just put the right information out there. Research it yourself, But because people, especially in Illinois, in Cook County, with all of the crime that goes on there, some people don't understand PTSD. They think you strictly have to be in war to get it. And that's not the case. Like when Martin was talking about his experience and he heard a cry that he never heard before, if he hears anything similar to that, that's going to take him right back to that initial trauma. That's PTSD. It's post-traumatic stress, because that cry stressed Martin out. Disorder. It causes you to act opposite ways than you normally do. And a lot of people, there's so many people, it's like, Martin, thank you for having this show tonight. I wish you had more like this, because a lot of people, Black people that is, they have PTSD undiagnosed, and all in the neighborhood, you see people talking to themselves, oh, they crazy. No, they're suffering from schizophrenia. And due to the lack of healthcare services that are available in poor Black communities, and no one telling anybody, along with the stigmatizing thing of, oh, they crazy. See, they be going to the crazy folk, talking to them. If people stop talking about each other and try to talk to each other, it'll be a great help. But what do I know? I'm shell shocked from the war. Let them tell it.
Don't stop talking. Don't stop preaching, because you're telling nothing but the truth. And I think it's important that for me to also say that if you are a veteran, that the VA can also offer resources. Sometimes it takes a little minute, but they can offer resources. But just like our veteran said, you don't have to go to war to experience PTSD. And I think we need to stop using that word crazy. I think we're just harming each other and shaming each other instead of supporting one another to really make the change that needs to happen.
You know what? I learned something tonight about myself, but just having this conversation, which Sarge shared experience, and that's why when I go to crime scenes and when family members come up, I run. That's why. Now I figured it out. Because I was like, why am I always leaving when the family get there? When they come, I don't want to hear that crying, screaming, and hollering. It takes me back. So I leave. I immediately leave the scene. People like, stay, we want to see more. But I said, no, I got to go. I got to go. Yeah. So that explains why. Yeah.
See, Martin, that's called a trigger.
Yep.
And you happen to recognize a trigger. See, I saw something on the news this morning. There's a movie that came out today. I can't watch it. They showed the trailer. They talked about it on the news. It's called My Dead Friend Zoe. And it's about a female that was in the military that lost a friend, and she's going through survivor's guilt, and she still sees the person and she's hallucinating like they're really still there, and she still talks to the individual, and people be like, you all right? I'm like, oh, I can't watch that movie. Because I know it's going to trigger me. So I'm like, nope. Knowing is half the battle, but there are a lot of people, they don't realize what they're going through, so they don't know the triggers, and they get triggered. I mean, and the medical professional on here, she could back me up. If you don't know your triggers or anything remotely connected to your triggers, you're really in bad shape. You know what I mean? Because you don't, you know what I'm saying? That's it's a loss of control, and people hate to be out of control of themselves.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. And the way I talk about it in therapy, it's like, once you have that trauma, whether you're aware of it or not, a lot of times we have like an imaginary balloon, and to regain that sense of control, we create a false sense of control. So in IFS, we call those parts, but specifically we call that part the firefighter part. So we press on that balloon here, and then we press on it here. So it may be that at a point in time we're using drugs or alcohol, or it may be that we're developing an eating disorder, right? We're trying to control something when we really have no control. So in trauma work, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get to the bottom of it all. I'm trying to see, well, what created this balloon in the first place? And what if we pop that balloon and have a safe enough environment where we can let our guard down and we can talk about it? So there is cognitive behavioral therapy, there is dialectical behavioral therapy, there is narrative therapy, there's experiential therapy. There are so many different modalities that your therapist will help you figure out what's right for you and be able to walk you through that trauma. So I challenge you, Martin, I challenge you before we meet again to find a therapist that you trust. And sometimes you got to interview a couple before you find that right one for you. But I want to ask you, Sarge, if you're still on with us, if you've gone to therapy yourself, if you can speak to how that experience was for you.
I've been in therapy for years. 10 years ago, like not this month, but 10 years ago, I was in Chicago, all out of control, ended up in Cook County Jail, and I was put into a doggone 4-month inpatient mental health program at a veterans hospital near Great Lakes Naval Base. And only because of that inpatient intense therapy did I realize the way I was acting and going about doing things, it was you can't act like that. This is the real world out here. This is not Iraq or Afghanistan. You can't behave that way. You're going to end up in prison. So, and through that intense therapy, it allowed me to better maintain, like anger management and things, that nature, But you have people that you have people that they see different people, and this is across the board, civilian or military, on narcotics. They're not using those narcotics because they like to get high. They're self-medicating from some type of trauma. You know what I mean? You have people that don't want to go and get a flu shot, get a needle stuck in their arm, but they're willing to stick a needle in their arm and shoot dope themselves, right? It's something's wrong with them. It's they some type of traumatic situation, and they're using narcotics to self-medicate.
Sarge, we have another caller. Just hold on. We passed our hour mark, but
I'm holding.
Linda, you still patient with us? I know we passed
Let's
our.
do it.
Okay,
let's do it.
All right, Thompson, area code 803. What's your comment or question? Come on, caller.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
Yes, hi. I am a veteran, and I suffer with PTSD, and a number of other things. But mental health is very, very necessary. It's no joke, and it shouldn't be anything to be ashamed of. My husband always asks me, "Why are you taking all that medicine?" And I said, "You know why? So I won't have to kill you. That's why I take all that medicine."
Lord,
yes.
I feel you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not ashamed, and I've been in and out of therapy for years, and I'm honestly beginning to believe that PTSD is in the Black community. It's in our genes. I'm thinking,
First of all, thank you both for your
hold on, Sergeant. Go ahead, Linda.
Oh, okay,
I was just going to say thank you both for your service, and I think it is vital that we break the stigma, not just for mental health or therapy, but for medications. I think sometimes, even if we're willing to think about mental health therapy, there is still a ooh when it comes to medication, but we wouldn't blink twice if somebody needed insulin to manage their diabetes. It's not any different.
That's right.
Yeah, to see I call her she's not my biological daughter. I call her my daughter because she got IED'd in Iraq, and her parents are no longer on this side, of the dirt. So I became that father figure, and she's out now, and there's different things going on with her, and I was like, look, you need to take your husband in with you because from that vehicle flipping like that, she's got traumatic brain injury, from her bell getting rung, and she'll be having a regular conversation and she'll just stare off into space, just take a little vacation inside her own head, and he thinks she's playing. I'm like, dude, you all going on almost 10 years of marriage. She's been like this. Well, how could you be in the military all these years? And he didn't say it the way I'm saying it, but it's like, how could you be in the military for 20 years and retire if this is your state of mind? Said because in the military you do the same thing every day. Every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday are the same. You do the same task. Yeah. So you're going by motor memory.
Exactly.
Just like a machine. Then once you get out and you out here in the real world like we are now, then we screwed up. We not like, hey, we think it's fine. No, it's not fine. I mean, no, not, and it's not to put you on Front Street battle, but it's nothing. No woman should be telling her husband, look, I'm taking all these pills because I be wanting the doggone send you to the upper room. You know what I mean?
Exactly. I mean, he didn't understand the illness. And, I've had folks tell me I get a crazy check. I say, yeah, I get a crazy check and I'm going to spin it all up.
But I think it is important. I think it is important that we learn. that we learn what to do and what not to do, that we learn not just because it impacts us personally, although if it impacts you personally, I mean, they say 1 in 4 people, but I'm thinking it's a lot more than that. We're just not, we need to
Oh,
up the
yeah.
standard for mental health, but I think it's important to learn how to love on each other and what to say or not say to somebody who's struggling, learning if you have a family member that has an autoimmune disease or has a food allergy, then not to cook with whatever that may be. I think it's the same, not that we're going to be able to avoid all triggers, but I know for me there are some things that are in my own safety plan for my mental health. So I make sure that my husband knows when I'm doing this, this is what I need. So I think the word of the day, if nothing else, awareness. I think it's important that we raise awareness, that we learn what it looks like when somebody's in crisis, what it looks like when somebody's surviving, and what does it look like when somebody's thriving. Because you could still have a variety of mental illnesses, but when you do get that proper medication, when you do learn what your triggers are, you're able to cope. You're able to, it's kind of like having cancer, but being on remission. And you can be in remission for years, So being able to say, yeah, I have this diagnosis, but I know how to manage it. I don't like that word control. I think it's more about managing, because life will continue to be life. Like I call it, life is lifing, and people be peopling, right? But we still have to cope. And so I think it's really important that we keep raising awareness. I feel really, really good that we're talking about this. We need to have more talks like this, as a community.
Yeah. Man, this is
because they have one portion of the brain. I don't know if the civilian medical people have realized that it's the Amy God, that maybe the medical professional. You know what it is?
Is it the polyvagal theory? Tell me more.
It's something in like the back, the back side. It's not the exact back above the neck of your brain.
It's the limbic
It's like
system.
the back above the neck, but a little bit forward of it.
The
Your
limbic
fight or
system.
flight mechanism in your brain.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Fight or flight.
Yes, sir. Yep. It's
Okay,
that fight,
now.
flight, freeze, or fawn. Yep. Limbic system.
Right. Now, what they determined with military personnel that were in Iraq and Afghanistan is that portion of the brain enlarged and it never shrank down. So we have permanent brain damage.
Wow.
And that's the reason we're so, you know what I'm saying? We just,
Yeah, but another thing, if you have PTSD and then you have a family history, it's even worse. I mean, I have a family history on both sides, so it really,
I can imagine.
Yeah.
I want to.
Really bothers me a lot.
Could you guys hold for a second? I want to ask Linda something. Okay, by me being a crime chaser, I've seen a lot of teens. They're killers. What do you describe? I mean, they get a rush, just killing people, seeing blood, and what is that though? What is that? How would you describe that? Because this is one of my statements that I say. There's some young teenager out there right now that have a new gun, not necessarily new, and they are willing and ready to test out somebody. All they need is one negative reaction, and to justify in their mind to pow, pow, pow. What do you call that? What is that? What is that?
I'll tell you.
Uh-huh.
I'll tell you, even though I worked with psychopaths before in that maximum security facility, as a therapist, we don't diagnose people younger than 18 with personality disorders. But I think what happens is our frontal lobe, the part right behind our forehead, I call it the boss, right? It's the CEO of our company. It's what tells you, oop, don't say that, or hey, let's do this first. That part doesn't finish developing until you're about 25, 26. So a lot of times I think what happens with teenagers is developmentally, they don't have impulse control. And so what that means is they act before they think. You know, so
Mm-hmm.
developmentally, they haven't gotten to the point where they can hold themselves back. And I think that there is a lot of negative things that are happening, whether it be social media or just the globalization of technology. I think that as a globe, there are certain things that have advanced really fast, but a lot of other things that have been lost. So, like what you were talking about earlier, as far as like when somebody's shot, you don't notice how it impacts that family. But I think it really does, it has like a ripple effect, it impacts the entire community. So, I did a research project a while back about um, people who are imprisoned, you know, and the American system doesn't do prison or jail the same way other countries do. We know that there's a lot of issues with the American incarceration system, right? It's a money making machine. It's not
Yes,
for
it
what
is.
we have. It's really, there's a lot of things wrong with it. And so my research project was about how it impacts the children, how it impacts those adolescents, how it impacts the extended family system. So I think as a human, we're made to be in community. But a lot of times these adolescents, not only they don't have the ability to do impulse control yet, but a lot of us have lost that community. We're surrounded by people, but feeling isolated. You don't have the aunties and the uncles and
We
the
call it the village.
parents and the grandparents, you know. For me, I think I grew up, I was born in Saudi Arabia, but I'm from Sudan.
Mm.
I tell people all the time, my family back home in Sudan lived in a house that had our big mango tree in the middle. And within that, we had 3 houses, right? And so, yeah, the electricity would go out. Yes, we didn't have a lot of food and all of that stuff as a country, right? But we were emotionally rich because I had those aunts, those uncles, those cousins. We lived in community. We didn't live as isolated.
Yeah.
We live here in 2025. So I think again, these adolescents are growing up with a big chunk of moral development missing,
Mm.
you know, whether it be like, I know for me, it wasn't just my mom that would discipline me. May she rest in peace. It would be my aunts. It would be, there was a whole community that would help with my development. Because I knew, if I went to school, it wasn't like I could just do this thing because nobody would, everybody was my mama. Everybody was my dad. Everybody would help raise me, And so I think, again, these teenagers, they need resources, they need help, and it's multi-layered, right? We want to make sure that people aren't sent to prison and jail just because, or being forced to stay there for a life sentence when it's, a pretty, in my humble opinion, misdemeanor, or really shouldn't be a crime at all, right? Or that they have, honestly, the statistics show for adolescents and kids, if you have one trusted adult, it changes the trajectory of your life. It changes those moments when you do have to make those decisions of what you're going to do or not. And I won't even go into, the availability of guns. I think that's its own show.
Yeah, that is true. And I often, this is what I deal with when I'm watching crime, monitoring crime. I see a lot of retaliation, a lot of guilt. I'm going to get. I want my lick back. That's right. Hurt people, and it's in the music. I say if you take 30 or 40 teenagers, some of them may have some mental issues going on in their head. They're smoking weed, they're drinking, and they're listening to drill music. Drill music is shooting, killing, sex, drug, robbing, whatever. And something is bound to happen if you put all of them in a room. That is like a time bomb waiting to explode.
I love working with
Yeah.
teenagers.
Well,
So
see, Martin,
as much as they've got all that going on.
Yeah. I mean, I love teenagers because they're teachable. If they get into you and they trust you,
Yes.
and you come into their circle, you could be the best friend that they ever had. They need that. They need that. You have to be able to get into. You have to understand their way of thinking. You know,
Yeah.
so them old school things don't work. I've got a whipping with a extension cord. You know, you can't dare hit a child with extension cord now. You know, seriously. I mean, if you get caught, your child could take away child abuse. You can't do it. You just can't do it. We live in a different day of time. I'm not saying that you shouldn't or you can't discipline your child. The things that was done back in my day, the government is not allowing that to happen anymore. Trust me.
Yeah,
and
well,
as
Martin,
a therapist, I don't
thank
think
you
it's
so much
necessary.
for taking my call.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you. Go
Bye-bye.
ahead. Go ahead. As a therapist, Linda, what you...
As a therapist, I don't think that corporal punishment is necessary. I think a lot of times, again, as we do our own healing as parents, this and learning about development. For example, my kids are young. I have a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old, and the 4-year-old tests every boundary, right? That's just what he does, right? He doesn't see consequences, but also he's not supposed to see consequences. His brain hasn't developed to do that. And so knowing and learning and being aware about what the differences are at every age group, I think helps me equip myself and equip my clients who are parents about what coping skills can you use. There's a really wonderful book that's called Wise-Minded Parenting. So if you have a child that's they're in their emotional mind, you can't throw logic at them. That's not going to work. It's going to make it worse. So be learning how to talk to them and learning how to talk to that person and bring down that distress, learning how to validate them. At the very least, just using reflective listening. What I hear you say is, you're really mad right now. Okay. So if you just respond back, sometimes the intensity of that emotion goes down by itself. Then you don't even need to throw logic at them because you raised them. So they have logic, right? They're just in that moment of emotional crisis, right? And so when they're able to kind of process through it, then they can deflate and come back to some sort of wise mind. But that book, Wise-Minded Parenting, I really highly recommend for parents.
Okay. All right. We're going to end it right there, Linda. Is there anything that you want to say? Or, we've covered a lot.
I just want to say I bleed mental health, and I feel so honored that you allowed me and brought me into the show today. And I know this won't be the last time we talk. It's a pleasure to meet you, and it's a pleasure to get to chat with your caller. This is just the beginning of that conversation. Mental health is just as important as physical health, and there is no shame in seeking the help. You don't have to do it alone.
And we want to give a shout out to Mark Mitchell, Associate Director, Teamwork Inglewood, for allowing me to come here and host this great meeting, great interview. Thank you, Mark, so much. Thank you, Teamwork Inglewood. We appreciate you. And you heard it for herself. She wants to come back. So please bring her back. Thank you so much, Linda. I appreciate you. Thank you. Now you got me finna go look for me a therapist. Now I'm one of those Jesus people. Let Jesus work it out. Huh? Yeah, but it's good. And I knew something was wrong when I just stopped chasing crime. I was like, it wasn't a threat. Did nobody beat me up or anything or shoot at me? It was just like it was just too much. It was too overwhelming, and I felt like that the people didn't take what I was doing seriously. So it was entertainment until it becomes one of their friend or their loved one. And I tell people I'm not an entertainer, and I know it's good content, but it's for our learning. It's not to it's not for us to be be laughing and joking. I got my popcorn, now he going to another crime scene. No, I didn't ever want it to be like that.
You're raising awareness. That's what it's for.
That's it. That's only. That's why I'm cautious as to what I say and everything. So, well, again, Y'all already know what it is. I'm going to say it live. You already know what it is. Live, uncut, unedited. Tell the truth and shame the devil. I love being black. Happy Black History Month as well. Thank you, Mark Mitchell, Teamwork Inglewood, for having me as a navigator to host this. And thank you, Linda. Thank you, Sarge. And thank the other caller that called in. And it was a joy. I thought we was going to end a little early, but it got so good.
You didn't know how long I could talk.
No, I didn't know. You start diagnosing me and tell me, hey, Martin, find you a therapist. So I'm gonna work on that. I'm gonna work. I promise you, I'm gonna work on that because I definitely need one. I definitely need one. And I'm not a violent person. I can't be violent. Only on self-defense, though. You know, that's it. I'm under control. All right. Thank you guys so much. I'm going to end it right here. Thank you.